Hello and welcome to this conversation, which is titled Slavery Inc. And this panel is presented with the support of the Queen Victoria Women's Centre, whose purpose is to promote increased economic participation and financial security for women. My name's Damien Carrick. I'm a broadcaster. I present the Law Report program, which is the legal current affairs show on ABC Radio National and ABC News Radio. And it's my great pleasure today to be speaking with a very brave person, Mexican investigative journalist and author Lydia Cacho.
Oh, thank you.
She's a prolific journalist and author. She's written 15 books which have been translated into 12 languages. The reason she's brave? She specialises in investigating child pornography, sex trafficking and violence against women and girls. This work upsets and threatens very rich, very powerful, very violent people. Cacho has been assaulted, tortured and imprisoned for her work. She regularly receives death threats. As well as taking on the traffickers through the media and through her books, Cacho has also taken the traffickers to the Mexican courts. She's blazed a legal trail as well as a media trail. She's received 22 international awards and she is the UN Goodwill Ambassador for the Blue Heart campaign, which seeks to abolish human slavery. Her latest book is Slavery Inc., the untold story of international sex trafficking, and it's published by Portobello Books. Lydia Cacho, welcome to the Melbourne Writers' Festival.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
How big is what you describe as the global sex slavery industry? Do we know how many women and children are caught up in it?
According to the UN, right now there are 30 million people that are being enslaved around the world. And some people think that that number is not realistic enough. If we see the economy it drives, because only sex trafficking is driving $150 billion. It earns that every year. So it's a tremendous economic endeavor, and that's why it's becoming such a good business to sell and buy human beings around the world. And depending on sex, not only for sex trafficking, but also for other kinds of slavery and exploitation.
Now, in your book, Slavery Inc., you travel to a number of different countries, and I'd like to focus on a few of them. Cambodia. You travelled to Phnom Penh in Cambodia, and you spoke to people who work or have worked as sex slaves in the industry. And one woman you met was called Da, and I was wondering if you could tell me about her, because I think she's very illustrative of the complex issues around this, let's use the term, industry. At age 13, she comes from a poor family, and at age 13, her mum becomes ill. And that means that she has to make certain choices. What choices does she have to make?
Well, whenever we talk about trafficking around the world, we need to understand that it's organized. It's organized crime who handles that, and it works as network of responses. And in this case, that case is very prevalent all through the world, not only in Southeast Asia, also in Latin America, for example. And we have many cases like that in my book. And in that case, her mother lives in poverty, and she went through an operation, and they spent almost $400 in that. And she, in order to save the mother, the family came to a debt, and they had to pay debt bondage, and she ended up being a sex slave in order to pay for it. But the thing, as you most of us know now by the news, when traffickers and brothel owners get one of these young women or boys, because there are more and more boys that are being exploited in the sex trade, when they get one of them, what they do is they begin making them sign a debt bondage document. So it's not only that she would pay the people who helped the mother get her operation, the $400, but she ended up with a debt of $3,000, which is a tremendous amount of money for somebody as poor as that and her family in Cambodia.
Because it's slavery, but it's dressed up as contracts, it's dressed up as transactions. But it's more than that. It's different from that, and that's why in some cases, there are chains and there are bars on the windows. In other cases, it's just your entire world is surrounded by this debt, and there's no way of escaping it.
Absolutely. That's why I insist so much that this is human slavery nowadays. It's an economic endeavor, not only an economic endeavor, but an economic crime that is directly linked to poverty around the world. Of course, not only the people that are really deep into poverty end up in the sex trade, as we have many examples in my investigation, but most of the women that end up, and girls that end up in this trafficking system around the world are obviously from poor families, and they end up being sex slaves because that's the only way to survive. They have, there is a discussion, an ongoing discussion around the world, not only in Australia, of course, regarding the fact that supposedly being a sex worker or a prostitute is a choice. And I try, when I was investigating for this book, traveling around the world for 5 years, one of the things that was really important to me when listening to all the women and all their families and their parents that were losing their children through trafficking was when you do not have real options, then you are not really choosing. And these are the questions we have to ask ourselves. What do you mean by choice when you say that somebody's choosing this kind of work, if you want to call it so? And what I found was that hundreds and thousands of women and girls are not really choosing anything. They're just surviving through slavery, and they just get used to it because that's what life has put on their plate, you know. And this is one of the issues that interests us more.
Da was really interesting. She gets rescued from a brothel by a French tourist. He then sends her money, but eventually they lose touch. He returns to France. Then she finds herself just working for another nightclub, and then she gets sold to another club or brothel. Now she has a child to a police officer who frequents prostitutes and is basically part of the whole industry. And she's now, in your book, she's now training as a seamstress and desperate to get her child away from an environment. And sometimes this just can become intergenerational, can't it? This cycle that poor people find themselves in.
Absolutely. That's another thing that not only I follow the cases of, as you know, for example, of Da inside Cambodia, but also of women from other countries that were brought, like from Latin America to the United States, or from the United States to Japan. And what I wanted to understand was how they, not only how they end up and what happens to them in the long run, but how their mothers, for example, or the children are reacting to this, or if they are within the system or the network, the criminal networks of trafficking. And what's really interesting was to find out how many generations of women in certain areas in the world, especially, for example, in India, in Pakistan, in Latin America, of course, and in Central and Pacific Asia, you find the mother that is a prostitute, and then the daughter that is a prostitute, and then if she has a little child, the little child grows up in the brothel. And they usually end up in the industry because they don't have a way out. I tell the story in the book because it impacted me tremendously. I was investigating in the Indian region, and there was this German tourist, a very handsome guy, by the way. He was like 40 years old, and he was waiting outside a brothel to go in. And in that brothel, he had a chance to choose between the mother, who was like 40-something, and then the daughter, who was 20-something, or the little girl that was 10. And the entire family were slaves. So I just couldn't, I was just standing there looking at him, and I said, "Don't you see this is slavery? Are you a client? Are you going to pay for it?" And he just looked at me and he said, "I don't see any chains, do you?" Of course, you couldn't see any metal chains in the women, but he couldn't see everything around it. He couldn't see the industry he was putting his money into, and he didn't strike me as a cynic. He just struck me as a man that could not see what was going on, and he thought it was very cool to be a tourist there and to have the sexual experience with a local woman, but he was not aware of his surroundings. And this is what I noticed everywhere around the world, and that's why I kept on following the man. I ended up writing one of the chapters on the clients, because this is really important to me. I think we should all begin a huge discussion on who are the clients and why are they driving this industry around the world to develop. Even though the media, is choosing and picking certain cases, then all of a sudden you have more and more slaves. What's going on with that?
Because at the end of the day, let's call them consumers, have choices. The people that you've met in these developing countries do not have those choices.
Absolutely.
We've talked about sort of the big sort of prisons of the mind and prisons of economics which lock people in. But you did meet one woman in Phnom Penh who gave you a chilling, terrifying story. Her name was Key, and she was a child, and she was in a brothel, and she was fed a chicken curry, which wasn't very often that they got to eat chicken curry. And can you tell me what happens after she ate that chicken curry?
Oh yes, I remember that story very well, because when I went back to my hotel that night, I remember I was crying for hours, trying to write down the story, and didn't understand what was going on in the world. When these young girls, I mean, you have to remember this. Of course, living in Australia, you are very aware of the culture. Supposedly, there's the government of Cambodia and Thailand are fighting sex tourism, and especially they are fighting child exploitation, sexual exploitation, right? We hear that all the time, and you get to Cambodia, to the airport, and they give you this pamphlet that says that if you see anyone with a little child and you think that the child is being exploited, then this person will go to jail for the rest of his life. Once you see that, when you arrive in the country, the same as Cambodia and Thailand, it's the same thing. And then all of a sudden you get into the areas where you find these kids. And you understand that the traffickers have changed the way they handle the girls. There used to be the possibility that they would go to little towns, they would get the girls every day in the morning, bring them to the brothels, exploit them, and then at night bring the girls back to the parents and brings a little money to the parents. But once foreigners came in and tried to implement new laws against sex trafficking, and specifically child pornography and child exploitation, what happened was the traffickers understood that they needed to keep the children within certain areas. And there it is, the building in Phnom Penh that looks awful. It's the area in which these brothels are not very fancy at all. So they had these little girls there, and some of them wanted to escape, of course. And they were giving them this food, and she was eating, and then the keeper told them that what they were eating, after they ate it, what they were eating was the body of one of the girls that tried to escape. And they did not know if it was true or not, and nobody did know, right? And when after that, when I asked one of the policemen, of the good policemen that were investigating this, he said, they don't know. It might happen or not. But you can only imagine what happens into the mind of a 9-year-old girl that thinks that if she tries to escape dad, then she will end up being fed to her, brothel mates. And these are the stories that I heard over and over again everywhere. So.
In Phnom Penh, you also visited a shelter for young women, girls, and it sounds like a wonderful organisation. There were tree houses, there was a swimming pool. You were startled, you write, by a 9-year-old girl called May who handled herself. Her physicality and her language showed that she was somebody who had adult sexual experiences. She said things like, "That's it, baby girl, good job," when somebody did something that she thought was good. Can you tell me why that was so disturbing, those words, and the kind of cost, the kind of price that children pay for the exposure and abuse that they experience?
Of course, there's something that I wanted to come across with my book. I wanted my readers to really understand that there's a lot we can do to stop this. And that's why I try to explain exactly how sexual exploitation turns a victim into a prostitute. Because when you see a man in a brothel with a 12-year-old girl and you ask him, as I did to many clients, aren't you aware that this is a little girl? They said, no, it's not a little girl, it's a prostitute. So it seems that a lot of clients have just separated reality for wishful thinking whenever it comes to their own sexuality and the way they try to enjoy this. So these little girls that were in this Hagar, the name of the shelter is Hagar. It's a very interesting organization that works there. And actually, it's a woman from Sydney, one of the psychologists I met there, and she was amazing. And what you see with these little girls is they were trained since they were very, very little to perform sexually for the clients in such a way that they were watching pornography, and they thought they normalized sexuality, prostitution, since a very early age. So they are hypersexualized. And they think, because that's how they are trained, they think that the only way to establish trust with other adults is through sexuality, through eroticism. And you don't quite grasp that until you are in a place like this, in a shelter in which the girls are being helped, and they move like that. They move very sexualized, and all these words. Of course, these little girls didn't speak English. They spoke Cambodian, and some of them Vietnamese because they were brought from Vietnam. But these phrases, one of them was like, "That's it, little girl," and she said it with just like an American accent. And I looked at the psychologist and I said, "What is that?" And she said, "Well, this is what the clients told them when they did it correctly." And the little girls would explain to me how the differences between oral sex and physical, and other kinds of sex that they made them perform. But what happens is that their personality gets like disgruntled. They do not understand what a normal childhood would be for most of us. And they think that if they do not have this way of seducing people all the time, they have nothing, they won't be loved. Because they do think that their clients love them. And that is what makes it so hard for workers, social workers and psychologists around the world to help them. Because in order for you to change a little girl like that from being hypersexualized and being objectified into helping her become a woman that owns her own body and that knows that she's a human being and an individual and not an object to be bought and sold, you have to invest a lot of work, a lot of psychological work, a lot of education in these girls and boys, and not all of them make it. You know, some of them just don't make it because it's education. Anybody here that has children knows it. When you're educating a little girl or a little boy, you know, that their personality builds around what you give them and the way you teach them how to share their feelings, for example, and how they understand what it means to deserve love or not, and what is right and what is wrong. And when you teach a little girl that is 4 years old when she gets into a brothel for the first time, that sexual intercourse and sexual exchange with adults is the only good thing for you, and your body is an object in order for you to get any love, then it's very hard to change that.
And the work of shelters like that are so crucial, but they're not always safe places. You're right that there was a raid on a brothel, a hotel. Children were rescued and taken to a shelter, not the one you're talking about, but another one. Yeah. And then the following day, the police and the soldiers raid the shelter and take all the children back to the brothel. And I mean, I think that what you're saying is how high up the corruption and the criminality is. And then, not only that, the people who run these brothels are so emboldened that they have some of the children and the women demonstrate outside the US Embassy, which funds some of these programs to raid brothels, saying Yankee interventionism in Cambodian business. They're holding up placards like that. Yes. It shows you how powerful these people are, that they can actually do that. This is not people in back streets. This is people who feel very powerful, who can operate very strategically.
Absolutely. That is happening around the world. Within the very, very complex discussion on sex work and prostitution around the world and the legalization of prostitution, we have this. We have a known fact with a very clear evidence that a lot of these very powerful groups that are making a lot of money of slaving human beings are investing into lobbying everywhere, in little towns, and in entire countries, in order to have legal procedures to allow prostitution to be legal. And then you have, you must know about this, but it's linked to what you're talking about. There is a political party in the Netherlands. I did actually interview one of the leaders that is a pedophile political party, and they do have a register. They haven't lost their register, and what they are promoting right now, they have partners in Mexico, actually, and they try to promote it in Mexico a couple of years ago. And it's the legalization of pedophilia. So what they want to do is to allow, through the legal system in the Netherlands, not a faraway country that nobody knows, the possibility of adult men having legal sex with children of 11 and 12 years old. So this is an ongoing discussion. And it's a political party. So one of the things I wanted to explain with this investigation, with this book, was exactly how this networking works. And of course, I'm not saying that people here in the public will go after the mobsters as I do, or as some of us do. But what I'm saying is that there's a lot of things that we all can do in our different areas in which we work, as teachers or as politicians or as journalists. And for example, one of the things have a lot to do not only with the political, the members of political parties that are into sex trafficking, for example, that are understanding what a big industry is and how much money they can make out of it. And so they can push for this kind of demonstration outside the American embassy in Cambodia, saying, you know, get out of our business, this is not your business, this is brothels, and we pay your taxes. And then, but the other thing is, for example, the immigration offices around the world, in which they on one hand, all our governments are opening the doors to workers that come for like 3 or 6 months or a year in our countries, and they are giving them permits. But at the same time, who are they giving the permits to? I have an anecdote there. I don't think it's in the book, in this book, at least in English. It is in the book in Spanish because it's a bigger book. But I interview a high-ranking official, immigration official in Mexico, and this is to elaborate on this issue. And what he told me is that one of the biggest mobsters that I've been investigating and publishing about, named Kamel Nassif, he's a tycoon, he's a multimillionaire man that has this manufacturing businesses around the world. He makes clothing for a lot of very big companies like Gap and other stores. And what he did was he went to the office of the immigration chief, and he brought 2 of his attorneys with him. And he said, okay, we're bringing 200 Chinese young men to work into Mexico City for our manufacturing plant. And the guy said, okay, you have to fill up these forms. And he said, no, I'm a friend of the president of Mexico. And so the officer said, you know, I don't care. You have to fill up the forms. This is the legal thing you have to do. So he calls, Kamel Nassif calls the president of Mexico on his cell phone, and he gets the president to talk to the high-ranking official, immigration official. He takes the phone, and he said, yes, Mr. President, but he has to fill up the forms, right? So he didn't know what to do as the president of the country, right? And so he said, okay, get your lawyers to fill up all the forms with all the information, like a 20-page form for each person you are bringing. So the guy is just so tired of this civil servant, you know, he goes like, you don't get it, you know, these are Chinese men, I'm bringing them to Mexico, I am Kamel Nassif, you know, I'm very rich and very powerful, I'm the friend of the president of Mexico, and if you are worried for these Chinese guys to leave my shop, forget it, they won't, because once I bring them to work here for 6 months legally, they will be stuck in the same place they work 24 hours a day, and nobody can leave that place. So there you have this famous multimillionaire businessman in Mexico that is selling clothing to all these famous stores, that is just telling a civil servant, you know, I am a slaver. And this is okay because this is the way it works. So we do have evidence of this around the world. And those are the things that we have to understand, that it's not only the traffickers in Cambodia there in the dark alleys, but it's also the high-ranking civil officials that are allowing this to happen. And we have to uncover all the food chain of trafficking, and that's what I try to do with my work.
Well, Lydia, I'd like to continue talking about this man, Kamel Nassif Borges. As much as you're comfortable talking about it, you have first-hand experience of the ruthlessness and the violence of this industry and of people like this man that we're just talking about. You began investigating the industry back in 1999, and soon after that you were attacked in a bus station, and you connect your work with that attack. But then in 2005, you published a book, Demons of Eden, yeah? Yes. And that exposes the Mexican pedophile industry, and ultimately led to the life imprisonment of a Cancun hotelier, Jean Succar Curie. But he's quite connected with this man that we've just been talking about, this retail clothing manufacturing giant. 6 months after the book was released, I believe you live in Cancun, and yes, you were kidnapped off the streets, and you were kidnapped by policemen, and you were driven to a town of Puebla, which is 1,500 kilometers away. What happened to you, and how did you get out of that situation?
Well, I was arriving at my office that day in the morning, and I just had the presentation of my book recently in Mexico City, and the chief of federal police assigned me 3 federal guards to guard me, to protect me, because I had so many death threats from this network of child pornography makers and sex traffickers that were on the side hotel owners of very fancy beach hotels in Cancun. So these guys are very powerful, that are very good friends with the local government, with the local governor, and with other governors of other provinces in Mexico. So I was arriving at my office that day early in the morning, and my federal guard was waiting for me outside my office. There was 1 woman and 2 men that had guns. And then all of a sudden, this car just came in, and then I saw 1 car on that corner of the little street of my office, and then another one. And then I got out of my car, and these 2 men with guns came. One of them put a gun in me, and he said, "Tell your guards not to move. If they shoot, everybody will be killed." So I just said, no, I said, "Watch out, don't move, don't move." And they just stayed there. And one of the federal guards that was supposed to protect me called his boss in Mexico City, and he said, "This gunman wants to take Miss Cacho." And the boss asked him, "Are they policemen?" And he answered, actually he said this in his deposition later. He said, "They look like policemen." And he said, "Okay, let her go." And they did not look like policemen. They were just dressed like civilians. And so they put me in a car. They never told me I was being arrested. I thought they were just part of the network, of the criminal network. And they took me by car for 20 hours. They tortured me. And what happened was that these guys in this car, they eventually identified themselves as policemen of another state that had nothing to do with where I lived. And there were other men with guns also in the car that was following us. So eventually, as I did have death threats before, what I did was I told my team and my family and my husband and everyone, if anything happens to me, you call Amnesty International, you call Human Rights Watch and this and that. If I get killed, you do this. So all my family knew about the death threats. I was very aware. As a journalist, you must be, and doing this kind of work, you must be very aware that the only person responsible for your safety is yourself, first of all. So you have to be really realistic, and I was. And that's what saved my life, actually. Because once I was taken, I had a video camera outside my office, and everything was taped. So I have evidence of the very second in which they took me, and of the car plates and everything. And my team called my husband, and they called the police, and they called Amnesty International, and everybody started talking about me. Nobody knew where I was for 20 hours. And I was being driven from Cancun to Puebla for 20 hours being tortured. What these guys were trying to do is they told me, you have 2 choices. One of them, you're going to be dead. We're going to kill you. And the other choice is if you sign this paper saying that everything that you wrote in your book, Demons of Eden, regarding this child pornography network and this Kamel Nassif and Mr. Jansu Karkuri, it's a lie, and you made it up because you wanted to call the attention of the people, then we'll set you free. And I said, no, I won't sign. So eventually, because of the media moved so rapidly, and Amnesty International really issued emergency calls, all of a sudden the policeman got a phone call from the governor, and they told them she has to arrive alive. So I got there alive, and they put me in jail. And then illegally, everything was illegal. But then we could, the wife of one of the governors, this sounds like a movie, I'm sorry, but it's true. The wife of one of the guys taped all their conversation. And thanks to this woman, an amazing woman, we did have this tape, the tape recordings like 2 months later were out on the media. And in the tape recordings, you have Kamel Nassif asking the governor
The governor of the state of Puebla.
The governor of the state of Puebla.
Not the jail governor, the governor of the state of Puebla.
The governor of the state.
Mario Marin.
Yes. He was just thanking him, calling him, hey, mi governor precioso, yes, like precious governor, thank you so much for giving this woman a lesson and this and that. And he's like, oh no, you know, it's my pleasure. This journalist should learn their lesson. You can actually watch it on the internet. It's there in YouTube. And they're just cutting these deals and deciding whether they were going to rape me in jail or not and how long I will be there. And he's paying a trip for the judge to go to Las Vegas as a payment for my incarceration. And they're deciding how many years I will get, if 10 or 20 years in jail. And that's how it was decided. I spent 1 year in trial after I won. The trial was against me. For
it was
defamation.
Criminal defamation.
The criminal charges, it was criminal defamation. I won, but I had to be in jail every day for a year.
You had to be in jail every day for a year.
And I kept having death threats, and then I won that case. And then eventually, I kept on going with it. So I brought the case against these guys, and Jansu Karkuri, the ringleader of the child pornography network, ended up 2 years ago with the first sentence ever in Latin America, which was 112 years for sex trafficking and child pornography, and it's a first in history. So it took me 7 years to take them out, but I did. So.
Curi's in jail. Mario Marin, the governor of Puebla, is he still in power?
He's not a governor anymore. He actually belongs to the PRI party, who is the ruling party again in Mexico. And he's trying to come back into power. He wants to become a senator. And just a couple of weeks ago, we were watching in the media that he came into a room of the party meeting, and then his peers applaud him as he came into the room. And this is a man of which we have these audio tapes in which he is agreeing to protect a network of child pornography. And thousands of people came in the streets of Puebla, and they asked for his leave of office, and he wouldn't do it. So, but next October, actually, I'm going to the Inter-American Court. And I'm taking him to
Human Rights in Costa Rica. Yep.
I'm taking him to the Inter-American Court. Him and all the network of governors, which are 5 governors and 2 senators that are actually in office, that were involved in protecting the child pornography network and incarcerating me and trying to kill me. So it's not over yet, let's say.
The courts in Mexico are some of them are corrupt, aren't they? I mean, I think when you try to take action against Nassif and Marin in the courts, they got off on a technicality, essentially.
Absolutely,
and I think there was evidence that the judge accepted a bribe. Or
yes. Actually, the first judge sold off. Then another judge received a death threat, and he just dismissed the case. And then I took them to the Supreme Court. And what happened there was the investigation of the Supreme Court was amazing. It was, I mean, everybody in Mexico, all the media were like focused on this case, and they were like, this is it. This is going to be a first in Mexico. We're going to finally get one of these bad guys, like one of these governors, and give him a lesson and change things. And actually, we had, amongst these phone calls that I'm telling you about, one of them was the key phone call, for me at least, not the one about me being incarcerated, but the key phone call is one in which Kamel Nassif is talking to Jansu Karkuri, and he's asking him to bring a little girl from the United States, from Miami, actually, and he's telling him that he wants a virgin girl, and he's asking him how much is it to bring her. And the guy is telling him, if you want a virgin, a little girl, and they insist that it's a little girl, not a young woman, he said it's going to be $3,000 plus paperwork, and then you pay for the rest. And we had all this evidence, and then they got off on a technicality saying that the phone calls were not ordered by a judge. And so we had 4 Supreme Court judges saying that they should, end up in jail and leave office and being taken to trial. And then at the end, one of the judges that was going to make the difference, she ended up saying that, yeah, all the crimes happened, but they were not that bad. And she said, Lydia Cacho was tortured, but it wasn't that bad. It was like mildly torture, as if you could say it was mild torture. So that's why I'm going to the international courts. But this takes time. I mean, this is happening around the world. I'm not the only one that these things happen to. I just have the possibility to speak about it. And what we're trying to do is to change the way justice works regarding these kind of crimes.
Lydia, why didn't they take the opportunity to kill you?
They did try. Actually, they wanted to. I was already famous. When my book came out, I was already famous. And the thing was that I'm a really good journalist. And I got real evidence. It's not that I thought they were doing this or that thing. I had videos. I had a video in which the guy is talking to a young girl that is 13, and he's admitting on having sex with 2-year-old babies. And he's just this. We have a 1-hour video in which he's talking about this openly and expressing how it is the fault of the mothers that leave their kids alone and all this. So we did have evidence, see? And when I published the book, I made sure a lot of people around, not only Mexico, but the US, for example, and all the countries in Europe, knew about it. So it was by the time they arrested me, I was pretty well known in certain circles, and especially in the human rights area. And they knew it was going to be like a big scandal. And what happened was, within the first 5 hours after I was illegally arrested, it was a huge, the media moved around in Mexico. All the radio stations and every TV station talked about it. I was abducted by the police. It was by the pedophile network, by all these criminal networks. So they knew they will be pointed at if they kill me. And it's not the same thing to arrest and torture someone than to kill. So, yeah.
Well, Mexico doesn't really feature very much in the news here in Australia, but we do hear about the drug cartels and the corrosion of civil society. And you say you're famous. Well, you're obviously famous amongst the drug cartels as well. You had a very weird, strange meeting with Miguel Angel Cadena, who is the head of the Zetas drug cartel. Can you tell me about that meeting in a restaurant? And he offered to do you a favor.
Yeah. I was in a restaurant, in quite a fancy restaurant in Cancun with a couple of friends, and this guy came into the restaurant with a couple of young women, and he sent me a bottle of champagne, and then the waiter came like really nervous to show it to me, and he said, "It's the gentleman who's sending it." And I saw him, and I thought, this is one of the most wanted guys in Mexico, apparently, says the police. But here he is, dining, in a fancy restaurant in Cancun. And I said, no, thank you. And so the guy eventually came over. I stood up to go to the loo, and then eventually he came over, and he met me next to the bar where all the waiters were standing, and he looks at me and he goes, "Miss Cacho, hi, nice to meet you." And he introduces himself, and he tells me, "I'm your fan, you're a hero, you're my hero, and you and I, we have so many things in common. We are fighting the bad guys, the corrupted officials." And here I am looking at this guy who was a member of the cartel, who has killed thousands of people, and I just look at him and I don't know what to say. And I just go like this, and he says, I know that these guys should never touch our children, you know, they are safer because you exist and blah, blah, blah. So I have an offer for you. I want to kill the governor of Puebla and Kamel Asif and Succar for you. Please, you know, allow me to do this for our country. And I just look at him and I'm like, oh no, thank you. I mean, what do you do, you know? What do you say to someone like that? And my friends were sitting there just staring. The waiters were listening to us, just like everybody was like, this is very weird. This is just very Mexican. And so I just looked at him and I said, no, 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 nobody's going to be assassinated on my account. Thank you very much. And now I have to go to the loo. So I ran to the toilet and then I came out. And then he waits for me and he tells me, listen, Ms. Cacho, I know you're a very decent woman and I respect you for that. So let's do something. I know you don't want to say that you want them killed, but I know you want them killed, right? So, and I was like, this guy is really good of, you know, selling assassinations. I guess that's why he chose that business. So he tells me, you go back to your friends and you sit down and think about it, and discuss it. And then once you decide to get them killed, you just take your napkin and drop it. And once I know you drop it, I'll do my job, and it will be on me. You know, it won't be on you. Don't worry about it. You're a national hero. Don't worry about it. So I go to my table. I sit down, and I tell my two friends, you know, if anybody drops a napkin, I will kill you personally. And well, fortunately, they were not assassinated. I want them in jail, but I don't want them killed. And then this guy was arrested recently, actually.
Really? Right.
Yeah.
I understand that you write about this incident in your book.
Oh, yes.
And then you run into this guy in a pizzeria in Cancun, and you're a little bit frightened that he might have read the book. But you didn't have to worry, did you?
I was with my sister in this pizzeria, and the guy comes over with a friend of him, and then he comes over, and I'm telling my sister, okay, let's go, let's go, let's go. And she looks at him, and she goes, oh, it's the guy you wrote about? And I'm like, yeah, don't look at him. So he comes over, and he goes, Ms. Cacho, nice to see you again. And I'm like, yeah, oh, your book is so good, I read it. It's very good. He was just smiling, like, hey, you made me more famous. It's like, you know, he was part of the story. And then I just looked at him, and I didn't even talk. I said, yeah, and we left. And then he was arrested recently, so I don't know if he's telling his cellmates that he's my friend or something. I don't know.
I'd like to now move away from, we've been talking about Cambodia, we've been talking about Mexico. I want to talk maybe more globally about, I guess, around different approaches to the sex industry. In countries like Holland, Germany, and here in Australia, there's a consensus that legalisation and regulation mean that you bring this industry into the light, and fewer people will be exploited, and some people will choose to engage in sex work. Yeah. Do you agree with that idea that regulation and legalisation is the best way forward? I
think it's very simplistic and very dangerous to say that. I've seen so much violence between the different groups that work on it, the ones that are pro-legalization of sex work, and then the groups that are abolitionists. Everywhere around the world, the same thing is happening, everywhere. There's like a lot of violence there, and insults and everything. I think it's very complex. One of the things that we see is that if you think that you can truly separate the women that are in prostitution from the women that are in sex trafficking surgically, then you're delusional. That is not happening around the world. Probably a very small percentage of the women in the world that are into prostitution, especially the ones that are in the VIP prostitution, are just free, you know, when making a choice and an informed choice, and they do have other chances. But when we talk about the networks around the world, and especially of younger and younger women and girls, then there's nothing there's no freedom about it. So here's an idea. We have been documenting this for almost 20 years, right? Sex trafficking, like in the media internationally, like being aware that sex trafficking is back into the world. At least we are aware now. So for 20 years, we've seen this. What happens to a woman that is now 25, but she was taken to a brothel when she was 10, and nobody helped her? And she got in there, and all of a sudden she's 25, and she's in one of these pro-prostitution groups saying, this is it. You have to validate my word. This is my opinion. This is my choice. This is my life. You have to respect me. And I do think we have to respect them. Of course we do. And we have to listen to them. Of course we do. But then, where does she come from? What kind of industry created her? What kind of domestic violence she went through? Did she go through physical or sexual violence when she was a little child? Did she have a family that protected her? Did she have social services when she was a little girl growing up? And once we understand the story of most of the women that are within the international sex market, things change a lot. Just go to, if you go to Germany, some of you do, next time just do me a favor and then go to the red light districts and just look at the women. Don't judge anyone, just look at them. 90% of them are African or Latin American. They are not choosing that. It's the only possibility they have to survive. If you go to certain areas in which women are just going through the system of prostitution, what you see, for example, now in Germany is that a lot of people that are older than 30, they are coming out of the legal system of prostitution into the dark. Why? Because clients think that a 30-year-old sex worker or prostitute is too old. And we're not talking about that, right? This is not a discussion. But it is the truth. I've documented it. A 30-year-old is too old. So when you have 16-year-olds and 17-year-old girls in the sex market around the world, especially, for example, here in Australia, of course, and in Germany, in the Netherlands, in Spain and France, then a 30-year-old is too old. So I interviewed these women in Germany that got out of the legal system because they could not pay taxes that law requires if you're in the sex work industry. So they came out, and because they were being persecuted by the police, now they had to go into the underground. So now the traffickers are running the open brothels and legal brothels and the illegal ones. So we have to talk about these issues. I'm not saying that I'm going to solve it in 5 minutes, but I'm saying let's bring new questions to try to get new answers to all of this. And of course, the main issue here is the respect of women's rights. And of course, we need to start talking about who the clients are.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, let's talk about that. You say that what's very interesting is that we've had 50 years of feminism. That's changed the way women think, but it hasn't necessarily changed the way men think. And men are the quote-unquote consumers here. Absolutely, because yesterday actually we were in this venue talking about this, and there was a lady there in the public that said that this is not a man's issue, it's a woman's issue, that there are also women that are very cruel and very violent within the sex industry. And of course there are, but the ones that are making the big bucks and the ones that are driving the market are men. Most of the clients of prostitution and around the world are men, and what is happening is that they in general, they do not see a problem with objectifying women. And I'm not moralizing. I'm not interested in coming here to give any moral lessons to anyone. I'm just saying that we should all ask ourselves what it feels like to be an object to other human beings. That feels very bad when you're treated like an object. It doesn't matter if you're a woman or if you're a man, but if a man lives a very nice life in Australia,
and has like a wife or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever, and then goes to another country and thinks that in another country it's all right to buy a human being for an hour to have the girlfriend experience, then you have to question how do you see your sex life? You know, how is sex? Because when we talk about these issues, we are not discussing sex in the void. We are discussing sex within cultural values. And even though we might believe we're very progressive and very postmodern, you know, with our sex life that are very open, in the end, we are educated as manly men and as you know, women. So we are supposed to follow certain roles as women and certain roles as men. And a lot of women have changed a lot. We have, from our grandmothers to my generation or to my daughters, we have changed a lot. But unfortunately, a lot of men, even though they have changed in many, many aspects, have not changed their views of sexuality and eroticism. And when you have a very narrow view of eroticism as a male, and masculinity is not being brought to question to the table when you discuss the sex industry, then you have a huge problem. Because it's like, if men are the clients and they are driving this industry, they are the ones saying that they like 15 or 16 or 17-year-old girls in the sex industry, and they want obedient Latina hot women or submissive Asian women in their brothels. Now, it is a male problem, isn't it? And where are the men talking about it? Because it became a female problem. All of the experts are females. So we need men. You're welcome to... Yes, you know, we need more male journalists investigating these issues and interrogating and questioning men. And we don't see that in the media, do we? We always see the same stories. We see the victim, the little girl or the young woman that is very poor, that comes from Africa, that is being exploited, blah, 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 or the trafficker that is in jail. Where are the clients? Why are they becoming clients? You have, right now, of a study I'm making, I've documented that our teenage boys are watching pornography at least twice a week on the internet, and it's for free. And their pornography, of course, is teenage pornography. Because they don't want to watch old ladies like me, you know, having sex on the internet. They don't want to watch pornography, adult pornography. They want to watch pornography that calls to them, right? So if they're 15, 16, 14, they want to see sex of people their age. Then go there. Investigate. Are you a mother? Are you a father? Are you a teacher? Are you a journalist? Just write down in your web, you know, in your computer, teen sex, and you will be shocked. There's millions of web pages with pornography that have teenagers on them. There's millions of sites. You see, I'm a good hacker. I learned to do that because of the kind of investigations I did on cyber pornography 10 years ago. So you see in Twitter or in Facebook, thousands and thousands of pages of pedophiles that are sharing information about sex with children. And you see thousands of interconnections of teenage boys and girls sharing sex tapes amongst them. Some of them are being taken voluntarily, but most of them are not. So these are the true issues that we are facing today, and these are the things we have to bring to the table when we discuss the sex industry, because that is the sex industry of the postmodern era. It's not the old one that we think it is. It's not far away. It's here in your homes in Australia, in Melbourne, in Sydney, everywhere around the world. You see, look at your teenage kids, if you have them, if you have grandsons or granddaughters, ask them about pornography. You would be surprised. Most of them watch it. Most of them know that it is there. And most of them don't get it and don't understand and are not being talked to about how violent that kind of pornography is. So these are the issues. Gender violence is back, and it's worse than ever, and it's in pornography, and it's for free, and it's in our homes, and it's in our computers. And these are the issues that I'm interested in, because we need to talk about them in our families. Let's go back to the family and talk about this, and stop, thinking that it's outside your world.
We need to think about what goes on in our own home, how it molds our own minds, and then how we take that out into the world.
Absolutely, yeah.
Lydia Cacho, it's been a huge pleasure, an honour to meet you. I've found it a wonderful conversation. Would you please all help me thank Lydia Cacho?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Terrific.
Yeah.